Hey, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, really glad you reached out, and we're really excited to chat and learn more about what you've been up to, and both in the pharmacy world and the real estate world. So why don't we just dive right in? Tell us a little bit about the your background of becoming a pharmacist and what kind of work you were doing and still are doing today.
Got it. So I'm a retail pharmacist. I work about once a month, usually covering shifts that people need help. People need help nowadays. I pretty much am a full-time real estate investor, mainly short-term rentals in non-conventional places that people don't really think about. So I live in San Diego, but I don't recommend investing in my backyard. Graduated in 2017, University of Colorado, Denver, and yeah, that's hopefully that's good enough.
Yeah, with a story like that, that it sounds like you were a full-time pharmacist and now you're very part-time at 1 day a month. So I'm curious, what was that aha moment, or what was that catalyst, or what was the driver that caused you to make that shift? Not getting out of pharmacy entirely, but drastically cutting back on your pharmacy hours and pivoting more towards real estate.
Got it. Okay. So I guess back when I was like, when I just graduated, I was super stoked about pharmacy still. Like, I think my third year, I started getting a little bit of burnout because my original plan was to, like, do residency and all that stuff. But it ended up being pretty exhausting by my third year, and I decided against it. And I just
Mhm.
wanted to go out and make some money. So I ended up becoming a community pharmacist down in Pueblo, Colorado. And it was really awesome. I learned a lot. It was a huge learning curve, even though I've been in retail since like I was like 18. I was a clerk, tech, intern, and then I was a pharmacist. So even though like people are like, oh yeah, you've been in it for such a long time, it's actually quite different acting as like a pharmacist versus those other professions, just because I feel more responsible. But I kind of like that responsibility and that growth. But what I didn't end up really liking after like working like 40 to 60 hours every single week, it was pretty exhausting. Um, and what I quickly learned is that you'll never really have too much trouble finding work as a pharmacist if you're in a place that has some need. In Pueblo, Colorado, like I actually floated to other markets like Cortez, Colorado, Grand Junction once even, Lamar, Colorado, which is like the south side of that area if you guys don't know where it is. And it ended up being about an hour or two away, but I ended up commuting almost like 6 hours sometimes round trip for these shift coverages. Yeah, but the cool thing is, so I wouldn't hate on it completely, but they like, took care of me. Like they gave me hotels, so now I honestly felt like vacation. But I realized I missed my family a lot and
Mm.
my friends, and ended up being like this situation where I was working. I mean, it was this one October, which was probably that light switch moment you guys keep asking me about. Well, that most people ask me about is I worked like 28 out of 31 days, and they were long shifts, and I was like pretty much on the road and in hotels the whole time. I was like, I just played it out in my mind. I was like, if I did this continually for 30 years, because that's just how I kind of am. I like to do things as best as I can and commit to them, and it takes a lot of time to be like a master of your craft for anything. And I think I would have probably like drove myself to insanity. Uh, just keep on repeating over that over and over. And my original plan was to become like pharmacy manager, district manager, regional manager. And after like chatting with like becoming a manager and chatting with some of my other bosses, they're like, yeah, it could take up to like 5 to 10 years. I was like, I don't think this is gonna work for me personally. That's all. And that's when I decided to like in 2018, I bought my first two homes, and that's how I got into real estate.
Yeah, I we talk with a lot of people about that first house moment because that's a big jump to make too. We you can talk about it, you can listen to podcasts, you can read books. Pharmacists are really good at analysis paralysis. We study things so hard and we can get caught up in our own minds, and so but that jumping off point and making that decision, it can be a real struggle. So, can you talk about that? Especially, you said two homes was your first jump there?
Yeah, I guess I was a little overzealous, and I have had really great mentors, which I'll get into in a second. Uh, but yeah, talking about like pharmacist analysis paralysis, I think it's super huge, and I kind of understand why. Like thinking about it from our perspective, like we're here to kind of identify problems and stuff, and then like every time you like try something new, it's like, oh, do we really want to do this? Do we really want to do this? And it ends up applying towards like finance stuff, which is why like most of us are probably like so scared to take the jump. But yeah, so my first two homes back in I moved back to South Carolina. So my first two really good mentors were my parents.
Mhm.
So My parents actually have been real estate investors since as before I was born. So they came from another country called Cambodia, uh, which we briefly talked about earlier. But for me, seeing their situation and comparing it to mine is kind of what helped me. And like this story is actually, I think, is can be kind of quite cliche for a lot of immigrant families. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but for my family, like they came here from Cambodia like during like the war. They got sent to Philly, and my mom's first like desire was to buy a house. So so she ended up like saving her money, like working at the blueberry farm, ended up buying a home, and they ended up selling that house a little bit later from Philly. And made like I think she told me like good amount of money, like $30,000, $40,000, which is a lot back then, and moved to Long Beach, California, and that's how we ended up here. Long story short, they had a long real estate experience and ended up buying like commercial properties, and they stuck with residential. But for me, like they always just imagined me as like becoming a doctor, becoming a pharmacist. And because I was so shy and introverted when I was young, they told me like, "Oh yeah, we didn't think you had like what it took to become like a business owner." So, so yeah, we kind of like thought this was going to be perfect for you, but lo and behold, you end up like being quite tired of like the typical W-2, and you actually want to become a business owner. And so that time happened like when I was tired and I was like, shoot, I don't know where to go. And this is why I'm like such a big fan of like having like people tell the world about what they do, so they have like mentors to look up to or coaches to look up to. I started off in like personal finance, like you guys were up there for me, like learning about personal finance, same with like personal finance club with Jeremy. Um, but yeah, I reached out to them and like, hey, how did you guys like get into real estate? Like, do you think it's a good idea for me? Is this gonna help me reach my goals? And like, yeah, we got you. You're our son. Of course, we're gonna take care of you. Um, so that first year, like saving up, like saying, I'm one thing about me, I'm quite frugal. I like my company allows us like they offer like free PB&Js and stuff in the break room, so that's what I'm eating sometimes. Made use of our like our travels, like when they covered our meals, our hotels and stuff. So and our rent, like when I lived in Pueblo, was 4 people in one house, so I only paid $250. So I'm making 130, 140 is really not that bad. I was able to save a lot. My first bad purchase was obviously my car, so that was my bad expense. But moving past that, so I ended up saving a lot of money. Bought these 2 homes that are turnkey, brand new builds. I really didn't know anything about it, and honestly, I was super scared. It felt like I was going into pharmacy again for the first time. Like the words that felt scary to me back then were things like conventional loan, FHA loan, doctor loans. I was like, I don't even know what PMI is, like property mortgage insurance. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And my plan was to live in one and then rent out the other. So I had these 2 units, like literally next door, like they're in the same neighborhood. I ended up like getting a job change. So that's when I got my promotion to pharmacy manager, and ended up like moving a little bit closer, and I ended up renting both. But the thing that happened is like I thought like when I bought these homes that they were going to be like some sort of like magical investment where it was going to like boom, I'm rich. But no, it was nothing like that. I learned quickly that long-term rentals don't really make that much money that fast, but it's a huge wealth like game changer for wealth. Like we bought them both for 135, pretty much look exactly the same again. But nowadays, like just from quick appraisals, they're getting around like 250 in like Spartanburg, South Carolina,
Yeah,
and
that's
I'm stoked
huge.
about that. Yeah, and I was able to eventually like pull out extra loans to like supplement my other rentals a little bit later. And those are my first 2 homes.
Man, there's so much good stuff to unpack there. I think the thing I'll pull out first is just how I think there are so many people out there that are doing something, and whatever it is, right? It could be pharmacy, it could be their day to day, whatever. That maybe isn't the perfect fit for them to be doing all the time, and they're like, "Well, I can't change because this is the thing that I was supposed to do, or this is the thing that I've already started doing, so I have to stay there." And I just love that you're like, "Look, I'm not turning off pharmacy necessarily, but I am going to try something else and see if that's a good fit for me now." Like, and check that out. Like, I'm going to buy these 2 houses, jump in with both feet. If it doesn't work out, like I'll try something else different. And I think that's important for people to hear because there are a lot of people that are probably feeling stuck in whatever that one thing is that they're in right now, but you don't have to be stuck. And I think that's a really good case example how, I mean, we're when you become a pharmacist, like we are heavily invested in this career, right? A lot of schooling, a lot of time, but it doesn't mean you have to just be there all the time. So I think that's something I'd want to pull out and highlight for people.
Yeah. Definitely regarding that investment thing, I always like point this out to people. Like, it was a big frame shift for me. Like, when I realized, my pharmacy degree technically costs like over like $140,000, and if I failed, which like a year, I would have lost out on that. So thankfully that didn't happen, but it did
Yeah.
happen to a lot of my friends, and some of them end up like taking like 6 years in school, 8 years in school, and I was like, the loans don't like slow down, unfortunately, and it just digs like a deeper hole. But then I'm like, oh, if I invest 135, which is pretty much the same amount as my tuition in school, plus I get a loan on it, plus I get rent from it, like someone pays me, plus there's probably appreciation because my parents told me there's appreciation, plus like there's these tax write-offs people keep telling me about that I don't really understand what's going on, and in 30 years, because it's amortized, it's mine. So I was like, this is a pretty low risk deal. Worst case scenario, I'll just sell it and I'll lose like a couple thousand. Yeah. Which would suck, obviously, but I wouldn't be like in the hole. Yeah.
Right. It's not
And that
life
was
ending, and
it's not life
pharmacy is
ending.
your fallback plan, right? Like that's a really good, darn good fallback plan, which I think is really cool. So, and the other thing I think that's important is that like you didn't rely on just knowing everything, right? You didn't jump in like, well, I read 42 books and listened to every podcast there was, and then I had all the knowledge and I was ready. You're like, I relied on these mentors. Like I knew just enough to be dangerous, and I knew I could learn the rest. Like, I don't know. I think that's really important to highlight as well, that you didn't have to know everything to jump in. You had trusted people next to you, i.e. your parents in this case, but like those people were with you the whole way to make sure that the process wasn't going to be crippling for you and you didn't have to know everything.
That's right. Yeah. I definitely like am a big fan of mentors, and I hopefully like someone like whoever's listening to this has someone around there that they can kind of trust is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. And so now you actually kind of give back, right? Like you are that mentor for a lot of people. You've got a guide and an Instagram following. And what I thought we'd do when you reached out, and I kind of was poking through your Instagram and some of the fun things that you've been putting out there, and really great stuff. For those that want to check it out, please check out your Instagram. We'll put tags at the end. But there was a great guide in there, and it was titled 8 Steps to Turn $50,000 into $50,000 per year. And I really like that idea. Like, how can you invest 50K and all of a sudden be getting 50,000 back every single year? And so you had these 8 steps, and I kind of wanted to go through at least a couple of these, maybe all of them, and just unpack some of that stuff, because I think there's some really good nuggets in here that I think will help people understand maybe how to jump into real estate, especially in the short-term rental space where it sounds like a lot of your effort is focused right now. Is that right?
Pretty much like 100% besides short-term rentals and mid-term rentals. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, perfect. So then, yeah, let's dive into these. I've got them laid out in front of me here. So number one was find markets like West Virginia. You mentioned that because you've got a property there where Airbnbs make a certain amount per year. So like you said, 90,000 per year or more. So okay, immediately want to unpack like how do you find a market? Like that's a great tip, but like how do I do that? Do I Google like good markets for Airbnb? Like what does that look like?
Okay. So there's actually this really cool free website I always recommend people check out when they're first starting off. It's called rabbu.com,
Okay.
rabbu.com. And there's actually a calculator on it where you can just go to tools and go to put in a property address. You paste in the address, and then it'll actually like tell you the exact income. It's going to show something really low. But there's a trick to like make this like actually perform and get more than the average. But if you're like starting from scratch and you don't have like you don't even know what address to buy, like what city to buy in, you use the same website, and there's something called Market Finder tool on that same website. And if you scroll down, there's a tab on there that says ROI score, which is basically rent to price ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So like we have average rents here, and this is what the average price purchase is. Depending on someone's like stage in their life, like I always recommend different things. Like for me, like when I was starting off, I would never tell myself to invest in San Diego for cash flow just because I couldn't afford it. It would be a struggle.
Yep.
And I'd really have to like learn how to like raise money and like just be a really advanced investor, which I don't tell anyone to do right now. So instead, what I did was I'm a big rock climber at this time, so I didn't use this tool initially, but this is how I do it now. But I heard about New River Gorge National Park, which is the newest national park in America, along with some buddies and I. And he ended up getting an Airbnb there, and it turned out really well. And I was like, hey, I'm already doing this one in Joshua Tree. I'm going to bring the same ones that I did in Joshua Tree and apply those concepts over there in West Virginia. And now if you look at that ROI score on Rabu.com, you actually see that Oak Hill, West Virginia. Hopefully it doesn't like put this on the map, but I guess it's a good thing if it does. Oh well.
The cat's out of the
But yeah,
bag now.
the cat's out of the
Yeah,
bag. It's a good thing. It'll be more fun. But yeah, that market's like number 8, I think, on the list, or like number 10, like best market of like 3,000 markets,
Cool.
like
Wow.
rental income to the actual cost. And overall, like it's a little bit of like trial and error most of the times. Like you hear word of mouth like from your friends, like, and you pick and choose the ones you trust. This one, he's a doctor. We're really good friends. I was like, dude, I trust you. I see your numbers. You're showing it to me, because there's a app that shows you like how much money and stuff you made. And it's like, based off these types of returns, I should be pretty much hitting like 30% plus every single time. Which, for anyone who doesn't know, cash on cash return is like the amount of income you make after all expenses divided by the amount you actually invest. And that's how I figured out this is a good deal, because usually traditionally in real estate, you buy stuff at like 8 to 12%. And that's what I was shooting for when I first started. And if you want to find markets like West Virginia, you don't like my market, just keep on scrolling down and you'll see there's stuff like Kentucky, places like Toledo, Ohio, places like Cleveland, or somewhere in like Michigan that actually really makes sense still. And it doesn't have to be like where I'm at. So that's one cool thing about like long distance real estate investing is there's a book out there by David Green, if you guys haven't read it. It's called Long Distance Real Estate Investing.
Yep.
I try to use his concepts and mix it with the short-term rental strategy, but I just do market analysis a little bit different. So if I want to support that, so going on past like how do I find markets like West Virginia, I specifically do national parks, so it's quite easy to track. So a lot of this info is data driven too. So I'll go to the National Park Service website and I'll track, hey, how many visitors are actually coming to this national park? And I know in West Virginia, it's like just shy of 2 million. And if I compare that to Joshua Tree, which is where my first Airbnb market was, and I don't recommend Joshua Tree anymore, by the way, if anyone's going to ask that, mainly for this reason why is when I first bought it, it was really good, but it started getting really like well known and saturated because a lot of the multimillionaires who had a bunch of equity tied up in San Diego, Los Angeles, California, were bringing it over there, and they could afford to do that. I can't keep up with that. But they get around 3 million visitors per year. I couldn't spend $1 million on one property, or at least justify it to make only like $70,000 to like $100,000. So I ended up moving to these other markets. And if you go onto the actual Airbnb website, you'll see that, hey, there's more than thousands on the Joshua Tree market. So before I like maybe like start, like when I would start getting worried about West Virginia getting saturated is maybe when it hits around like that mark, like over 1,000 rentals. But if you go right now, you can see that it's around like 611 or like 700, something around there. So there's still has some room to grow. 2 million visitors, you just divide that by 365, and you can see how much demand there is potentially for people to stay.
All right, so I shouldn't buy for Isle Royale National Park. I think they had like 28,000 visitors last year. It's the least visited park in the so just skip that one.
It?
But the rest are good. Isle Royale. It's way up in like Minnesota, Michigan border. It's like a really cool park. Just it's like in the middle of Lake Superior, so nobody goes and visits it.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one. So
see, there you go. So you got to be smart about this. You can't just pick a random national park. I like it. It's really good to think about.
Yeah. Another theme on your list of your 8 things is oftentimes on this list, you say, get a professional Airbnb design, hire a professional photographer. I know in pharmacy, we talk about working with other professionals, and you don't need to do it all yourself, but particularly with the distance approach that you have, it sounds like you're hiring a lot of professionals to do this. You're not trying to do it all yourself.
That's very true. I gotta say, when I did start off, I was quite scrappy, and I did do a lot of it to like save money. But I don't recommend it for this exact reason. It's like if you go to a restaurant, like you're not like cooking the food, you're not serving the people, you're not doing all the work, you're not seating them. So you want the chef to be cooking the food, and your designer is technically your chef, and they're going to be ones making the product for your guests. So you want to have, if you do nothing else, at least have a great design. With that said, I do have friends who are like professional designers who are getting into Airbnb, and I tell them, yeah, go for it. That's fine. But you still want to do your market research because it's actually market specific too. So if you're in like a certain Airbnb market, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. Like there's like data already on like what's performing well. It's like you already know how metformin is going to affect the body. Just make some more metformin. So you give you some medicine analogy. But yeah, you can just go on there and look at like what is being successful, like using that Rabu website I told you about, or just going straight on Airbnb website and clicking on which ones are fully booked out. And that's usually a good sign. Like you want to make something that kind of looks like that. Lately in this day and age, what I found has been doing the best is things that are scroll stopping. You know, me being in social media too now, like trying to grow that as best as I can. I have gotten decently well at getting a good eye at like what is going to be scroll stopping through all these listings. Um, and you got to have a good product at the end of the day, because what you're going to be showing is that's what your guests are going to be experiencing first of all, but you're also going to be having professional photographers come in. And then photography, just if you're not a professional photographer, definitely do not do it. It's like the cheapest thing you could do to pretty much like make your best bang for buck. Like is design and photography. Do not mess those up, please. And professional photography is very easy. It's like 300 or 400 bucks. And you can just Google professional photographer and real estate photography or lifestyle Airbnb photography specifically, by the way.
I think we've all seen listings that are taken with like someone's like, iPhone 8 in like a dark room, and they're just terrible. And you're like, how does anyone pick this place? So yeah, pro photos. I love that. It's a good tip. One of the other ones you have on this list that I really like too is that use the proper listing tools. Like, so once you get it up there and you've got the design and you built this place out, you mentioned a couple on here. I'll just kind of hit a few, but you said Hospitable, Price Labs, Turno, Folio. Like, I'm not in the Airbnb space or the short-term rental space, but like maybe hit one or two of your favorites and like why you would recommend something like that for someone.
It's pretty much necessary. I know nowadays Airbnb is actually trying to push you on their platform.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually have like their own pricing software and stuff. And they're trying to get you to stop using these third-party platforms. But at the moment, when I started it back in like a year and a half ago, I decided to, I didn't property manage in the past for myself. I hired a property manager. This is my property management, like for myself is newer. But that management system will let you hook up to other websites like VRBO, Booking.com, your direct booking website, plus Airbnb. So imagine you trying to manage those 4 different platforms. You can imagine how many double bookings you'll get already, and that's gonna make you cry, especially if you're working a full-time job as a pharmacist. Like you're not there all the time. Like they're there trying to make sure that your patients aren't getting hurt. Like we're there to take care of our patients. So you can't always be dabbling in every single little thing. And that platform takes care of a lot of things that people are concerned about. Like they're concerned about like, oh, how do I change the locks for people to make sure that no one else, like the past guests, weren't able to get in? It takes care of automated messaging. It includes your digital guidebook. So like when they automatically check in, they can just like tour the home yourself, as long as you do a good job up front creating it. It has that pricing software that we called Price Labs. And it attaches. So like people are like, oh, well, how do you adjust your prices? How do you know what's right? It's like, you don't really have to think too much about it. You can get like super technical with this, which is where like property managers like will come in and like make the Price Labs app even better on the platform. But this works quite well for a lot of people. And property management for Airbnb itself is much more expensive than long-term rentals. It can range from like 30% to like, I think like 12, 10% on Evolve. But usually I like to go for that middle number, 20% if I'm going to hire someone out. But I don't really recommend people do it in the beginning, just because most people can handle like 7 rentals without pulling their hair out. And if you're getting these Airbnbs that are making 70 grand a piece, you can just do the math, like 7 times 70, and then do 20% of that. It gets pretty expensive. It ends up almost being like a pharmacist's wage.
Yeah, wow.
So that's why I tell people, like when you're starting off, like learn the business, learn the systems, and then eventually you can hire it out. And then you can also like get virtual assistants. Like we have virtual assistants that will contact the guests in case they have like any like urgent stuff and we're like checking our prescriptions or something like that. They just make sure that the guest has good experience, because you just want to be the last one to have responded to the guests, is what I tell everyone. Because imagine like you're at the pharmacy and like you're just waiting for your medicine and you get no updates. It just makes you feel really bad. It's like, oh, this pharmacy doesn't really care. You want to come help the customer quickly. So it's like kind of the same way, like the customer service aspect comes in. And that's why I like all that software. It helps you do all that, make it fluid, so you're not like pulling your hair out again, and you don't really have to think about too much.
Good stuff. And like I said, Jeff's got some fantastic stuff on his Instagram in terms of like more tips like that. So make sure to check it out. We'll link that in the show notes as well. But again, wanted to highlight a few of those because I think they really start to show just one, your expertise in this space, but also just how like we can break this down into chunks and make it manageable. And I think you've done that really well. So
Thanks, man. Yeah. Oh, one thing I want to mention that people always probably have a headache with is cleaning.
mm,
Turno actually
Yeah.
is hooked up to that platform too. The cleaners can check the calendar. There's a checklist that tells them this is exactly what you need to check before you leave. Take pictures and it's time stamped. And there's an
nice. That's
inventory
awesome.
list of everything's missing. And there's a supply closet where they go into and check inventory so you don't run out. And you can have your VAs order them if you trust them enough, if they're well trained.
It's super easy. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that automation is important because obviously the rent, one of the values of short-term rental is the rent is a lot higher than in a long-term rental. I think one of the things that a lot of investors talk about, that top line rent number, the revenue that comes in from the rental, and there's less discussion about the bottom line after all of your expenses. I think there are people out there that will buy, a single family, duplex, fourplex, and try to get up to that $10,000 a month, but it's pretty easy to have $9,000 worth of expenses in a long-term rental market and not have a huge spread. But I think what you're describing with $10,000 a month of income, the expenses may be quite a bit lower because you're not paying as many mortgages and things like that. Can you talk about how that difference between the top line and the bottom line can be a lot wider in the short-term market, and that can drive a lot of interest for people that are looking for cash flow towards short-term rentals?
Yeah. It can definitely still be high if you're buying in like Palm Springs or like an expensive market like San Diego. So that spread is not there, which is again why I encourage people to go out to these other markets. Um, and I remember I actually did skip on this earlier. You asked about like how to get like $90,000 from these homes. So I totally skipped that part. But basically, what you do is to see like whether a property can perform on something like that is you go back to Rabu and you put in the address. And instead of hitting like the average, which is 50 percentile, like if you do the things I'd say, which are putting those good amenities, really have like a really great design, um, there's a really good chance you're going to hit at least 75th percentile on your reservations. We're pretty much almost always at 90%, and we get those guest favorite badges a lot of the times. And that's what we're striving for, is like the greatest customer service. So that's how you get a larger amount. And now going back to like why the spread is larger on short-term rentals is if you're buying in these West Virginia markets, and these homes are not $1 million like they are in San Diego, your mortgage is no longer $5,300 per month. Instead, it's $1,000 per month. So if you're making about the same amount as you would have in San Diego or Joshua Tree, or like say we had a $15,000 a month in its high season in July, and our mortgage is only $1,500. You can pretty much like cover the whole year with one really good month. And that actually has happened. Like we have this really cool mobile home. Like I call it a mobile home, but it's actually a manufactured home on fixed foundation. But we did seller financing, the social media stuff. It's fun. But yeah, we got it for under contract for 170. We did seller financing on it, and the lady who sold to us was really happy. Like she didn't want to like work anymore in the rental space. She just wanted a constant check, and she only wanted $15,000 down. So this is something called seller finance, if anyone's not familiar with it. But you can pretty much make up the terms because the bank's no longer involved. Most of those regulations are like bank rules, like hey, you have to put 20% down. Those are like their bank's rules. But if you go and bypass all that, you can be like, hey, I see you own this home outright. Would you be open to like me giving you $15,000 down, and I'll give you like $1,000 every single month, and it ended up being a 0% interest loan, which is kind of cool.
Oh,
Wow.
So basically, by at the end of 5 years, when the note balloons, which means like in 5 years when the note is actually due, like the loan, I have to pay the person back. Um, there's only gonna be like a little over $100,000 to owe on that property. And overall, that property has already pulled in, I think I last checked, $61,000 since being live in May. Um, and I think having that buffer, like, and it's cool as farms. This is like it works in our favor as pharmacists. I'll tell you that, because most of the times we're scared of like, hey, what if we buy this really expensive house, and now it ends up eating at our bottom line? We got to take care of our families. We want to live our life. We want to go on vacation still. But if it's like $1,000 mortgage payment versus $5,000 mortgage payment. It's like worst case scenario, your salary can cover that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which hopefully not though, which hasn't happened yet. haven't had
Yeah.
the need to.
But it dramatically reduces the risk, like you're talking about. I think so many pharmacists are so risk averse and hesitate to jump in. But you're right, at the lower price point, it's much easier to make that initial jump, particularly if it's $1,000 a month mortgage payment and you're looking at several $1,000s of potential rent, even in a bad month.
Yeah. And I totally forgot to mention, you guys also wanted me to discuss expenses. So the typical expenses are pretty similar too. So I generally look at like annual revenue overall, like because I've actually have like 3 homes there right now. So I have good data. Plus, like a lot of my clients and my students and my partners, we have homes there that we partner with together. So we have a lot of data on that. So I use that annual revenue number, and it's actually better than getting the month by month, just because Airbnb is seasonal. But the law expenses that are pretty typical are like gas, electric, internet, lawn maintenance, what else? Pool maintenance, sauna maintenance, hot tub maintenance, um, gutters. What else? The typical capital X repairs. Capital expenditures like big ticket items like roof, foundation, electrical. If
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't been updated, if anyone doesn't know, and it ends up eating about like half the income. So if we make like 120 from a property or 100, it ends up being like 50,000 we keep. Yeah,
Still a
as long as
lot.
you're property manager yourself. Yeah, as long as you're property manager yourself. Yeah.
Right. And still, again, bigger numbers than you would see in a long-term rental by far. I mean, you might see
Yeah.
50,000 as your total income if you're really lucky. I mean, that's bringing in several thousand a month, right? So like, yeah, it can really get up there on numbers pretty quickly. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and compared to my long-term rentals, again, like my mortgage on the is like 1,350, and then my rent is I think like 1,650. So, and then I'm not even really like adding like my expenditure, so I'm probably more like breaking even nowadays, to be honest, because I have a bad time. I'm not the best at raising rent, so so the short term game makes it much easier for me. I'll tell you that. It's like versus like when I don't like know like these people are going to be here temporarily. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've already mentioned this a couple of times. You talk about having some students, and you've got this website that is out there to really teach like financial freedom. And I get the sense just talking to you, like you really have a good grasp on this balance of actually living life compared to just like working for cash and capital all the time. And I think that's super important. So I guess maybe just talk to us a little bit about that, like that philosophy and like how you connect and help people, because I think that will give people some more insight into what you're trying to do.
at the end of the day, like well, that's a great question, because I am a big about lifestyle and like actually like enjoying your money. There's like some people who like there's this. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the book The Richest Man in Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Probably my favorite book, and there's this term they use in there. I'm pretty sure it's a normal term, but it's called a miser. So he
Mm-hmm.
basically just
Yep.
hoards money. Um, and I never wanted to be that. Like after like reading that book like hundreds of times, like man, this is like definitely not what I wanted to be. How do I like not have such a scarcity mindset and like be so worried about money all the time that I never spend it? So I ended up like learning how to spend a little bit of money, because I told you guys like my background, I'm pretty frugal. PB&Js, free food, that used to be my jam. But later on, I was like, okay, you know what? Like my health is worth it. My vacation's
Mm-hmm.
worth it. Travel is worth it. Like these experiences. And every time I think about like the things that have been most memorable for me have usually been like times I've been with my family celebrating holidays or like these really cool vacation trips. So I wanted to basically just double down on that and actually bring that to my family whenever I plan to have kids, because I've always seen myself as a dad. Um, and there was this one really like a pivotal like road trip that my parents took me on when I was young, and I want to do this for my kids. It's basically like sometime during the summer. I think I'm not sure if it was like when they just got laid off from Boeing or not, but they ended up packing up the car, taking me, my brother, my sister, and my other brother on this really cool long road trip from California down to Florida, up to New York, and then back into California. And it ended up being like a
Cool.
month long road
Wow.
trip. Yeah. And it was super eye opening, because I think what it did for me, like, I mean, I try not to attribute things to like things in the past, but for me, this is a really good experience. Like, was uh, very impactful, and it showed me like, hey, there's more to the world than just California, like the California bubble. Um, Everywhere you go has its own perks and its own downfalls, and there's so many things to enjoy in life too. Like, You go to New York, you get to enjoy the crazy traffic and see what it's like in the movies. You go to Florida, you go to Disneyland, you think it's the most magical place on earth, and all of a sudden there's a hurricane. You realize maybe it's not as magical as you thought. but yeah, just by traveling and like learning about new cultures and these experiences, it's kind of like what I want to double down in life. As like, like it can get pretty tough life overall. Like, can be hard, especially if you're just working all the time and you haven't really like had the distance to step back and like reflect on your life. Yeah.
I think it's super important, and we operate in the same philosophy. I mean, we are always trying to prioritize that kind of stuff, and I hope my kids look back someday on the trips that we're doing and have that same like moment of like, this is actually important. Like being out there in the world and experiencing it is way more important than just like nose to the grindstone getting stuff done. So that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, they always have that virtual reality. So like, oh yeah, you can go anywhere with virtual reality. It's like, yeah, but you can't quite yet like feel it on your skin. The view
Right?
doesn't look quite the same yet. So I think it's always
Mhm.
going to be better in real life, but who knows?
I'm with
Maybe
you.
they do something crazy. I don't know.
I'm with you. Well, Jeff, I want to take you to our final infusion questions. I really enjoyed all this so far, but we have 3 questions we ask just about every guest on the show. So we'll just kick it off with number 1. What's one tangible strategy you use to make sure that your investing works hand in hand with your career?
So before you do anything, kind of think about like what it's actually going to do to your life too. I'll tell you that, and whether it matches with your goals. So for me, like I love index funds and stocks, and it's probably one of my favorite investments for people to do. But it just didn't work out for my timeline. So for me, I wanted to be free within like 2 to 5 years. So before I played it out, I was like, okay, I'll be able to save maybe like 75,000 if I really scrimped and save, but then I have to sacrifice on my other values. Um, so it didn't work out for me, like being able to retire within 2 to 5 years. Crypto was too like scary for me, so I played that out. I was like, I just don't know about the volatility. It's too new. Like I think it's gonna do well. I believe in blockchain, but I'm not gonna bet the farm there either. Um, for me, having good mentors and people you really trust that are actually living and like walking the walk. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
term.
Yeah.
Is probably like the biggest like life hack. I gotta say, like if you see someone who wants like that you think is where you want to be, go and hang out with them if possible,
Mm-hmm.
imitate them, and you don't need to invent the wheel. Nothing under the sun is like technically new. Everyone's done everything, so don't feel bad about like copying people. Yeah, I'm copying you guys. I want to be like you guys.
I love it.
Yeah.
Second question we always ask is, what's one resource that's been most helpful to you in your real estate journey, whether that's a book, a podcast, person, author, website, whatever that would be?
Okay. Super loaded question, but I'm gonna say Bigger Pockets podcast has been super helpful for almost, I'd say,
Mhm.
all real estate investors. Favorite book, I'd say the 2 that would get people let's do 3. 3 that would get people the furthest the most. I think if they were to like not read any other 3 books is maybe Short Term Rental, Long Term Wealth, Long Distance Real Estate Investing, and maybe the book on the book on Low to No Money Down by Brandon Turner.
Mm-hmm.
Those are
All
probably
good
the
ones.
3 I'd say. Yeah,
Yeah.
try those 3 first.
Good stuff. And then you've given a lot of tips already, but I guess if you had to boil it down, if new pharmacist contemplating a start in real estate investing, what's one piece of advice you'd give to them?
Learn personal finance first. So learn how
Mm.
to save more than you spend, because at the end of the day, like your real estate business is going to bite you in the butt if you are spending more on your business. So it applies everywhere. Find some mentors, and then if you can, house hack first. I think house hacking is probably like the most underrated way. It's the only downside to house hacking is you can only do it one at a time because there's only one of you. So but house hack, yeah. Like if you think about it, like people always look down at it so much. Like they're like, oh, I don't want to live with other people. I was like, we did that in college. Technically, you got
Right?
roommates. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. Might as well just like have it be your own home. Build equity. Hopefully, if it works out. But at least you're cash flowing. You're getting experience and the skills to actually have the confidence to own real estate is a huge thing, because a lot of times it's analysis paralysis. You don't believe in the stuff, but if you're in the weeds, like seeing it, experiencing it, um, you're just going to move a lot faster and able to make the decisions in a timely manner, which is required for being in business and real estate. And in pharmacy too, technically, you can't just like wait on improving a medication. You're going to get yelled
Yeah.
at.
Yep. Yep. I love it. If people want to hear more, how can they find you? Where can people find you?
Uh, You can just follow me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way, at Jeff Chheuy. If you really want to like dive deep down, you can go on to like my email subscriber. My company's website's teeco.co. But honestly, Instagram is the best way. I'll say hi to as many people as I can. It's just me on there, so if I'm slow, please give me some slack. Those posts are me.
I love it. Well, hey, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your story. It's been awesome to have you on, and I'm excited to see what you get up to next.
Nate, Dave, you're the best. Thanks again.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.